Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll be starting the meeting in a few minutes.
Exciting.
Thank you for joining. Are you guys able to hear us? If you can, please put a thumbs up as a reaction because your mic will be muted. Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, David. We'll get started probably in about a couple of minutes. We have a few people still coming in. Go ahead. I already. They can do a thumbs up. I've already checked, so yes, they can hear on this end.
Okay, we'll get started. I guess we're gonna have Travis come on up and he's gonna do opening remarks for the fiscal year 26 CDS funding guidance.
Speech presented. So no, I'll just keep it brief and short. That way we can get to the training. My name is Travis Day. I'm the state director for New Mexico Rural Development. Of course, we have our community facilities team here with us, Eric Vigil, our deputy state director. These projects are really important to us, are really close to you guys as local entities. Obviously, they were a priority enough for you to go through that long, application process with our Congress and senators. Obviously, it was then identified as a priority project by our congressional leadership in DC as well. So these are really important projects. Whenever I see them come across my desk, kind of went through them and all really good projects that are going to benefit the citizens of New Mexico. And really, that's what it's all about. And so please know, for our staff here in the room and for me myself, we're here to walk with you guys through this process. We want to see that these projects get on the ground in a timely manner and as efficiently as possible, because then we see the benefits. Right, when the project's completed, they're on the ground, then we start benefiting the citizens of New Mexico. So that's a priority for us within RD. We want to work with you guys, and this is kind of step one. And thank you to Christine and Brianna and Isaac and the rest of the community facilities team for putting this on. I think it's a great way for all of us just to get on the same page on how this process is, how, what the next steps are moving forward to get this money on the ground. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Brianna.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. Okay, guys. Again, welcome and congratulations to all of our recipients for fiscal year 2026. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide and talk about some of our program staff here at Rural Development. Okay, we just heard from Travis. He's our state director. As he said, Eric Vigil is here. This is our deputy state director. We have Christine Griego. She's our community programs director. And then all of our loan specialists are actually in here. So some of us are here locally in the state office here in Albuquerque, and some of us are in field offices. But we're all actually here for this meeting today. So we have Melissa Winches at the end. And then we have Laura Hurtado. And then we have Christina Ortiz, Isaac Iturralde, and then myself, Brianna Quirino. I have, I'm a loan specialist, but I will be working with each recipient for fiscal year 26 to basically get your complete application ready before it's assigned to a loan specialist. So that means you may just turn around and I may be your loan specialist once it's assigned. That's actually in charge by Christine. She will be the one to tell you who your loan specialist will be once we get a complete application together. So that's what this presentation will really be all about, is kind of first steps to get to obligation. From obligation, what's going to happen after that to get to project completion. And that's where we'll move on to the next slide. This is our overview of our responsibilities. So Congress is really their responsibilities as the amount, the recipient, purpose, and location. Recipients' responsibilities are submitting a complete application, completing an environmental report, provides commitment of other funding, follows procurement and construction requirements, builds, buys, completes the project, documents requests for funds, meets reporting requirements. Us as an agency, what we're responsible for is processing your application, conducting the environmental portion, issuing a letter of conditions, obligating the funds for the project, concurs in procurement and construction methods, monitors construction or purchase, issues grant agreement, and disperses funds and services the grant. So really, we just want to do a high-level overview. We'll answer your questions. If you are listening on the webinar, please put those questions in the chat. If you do have a question, please state your name and the entity that you are with, so that way we can appropriately get to you. Because a lot of these questions are very specific based on your project scope and size. So we can't just answer just a general question. So that's why we're waiting for questions at the end, and then we'll get to you. And go ahead, next slide. So like I said, this is just really high level, step 1, 2, 3. Step 1 is USDA Rural Development New Mexico State Office will reach out to the recipients by February 15th. So all of you have already received that contact already by us. Step 2 is the recipients will work with the New Mexico CDS coordinator to complete an application for funding. That's me. Applications must be complete and recipients must secure remaining project costs to receive CDS CPF funding. And step 3 is fiscal year 26 funds will be obligated after successful completion of review by USDA Rural Development staff and the national office. So now we'll kind of get into a little bit more of what we're talking about here on that step 1, 2, 3. We're going to dive in a little bit lower here on how to get to obligation and some of the things that we need. In this program for CDS, it's a little different than our normal program requirements. You've been with us before, so you know that the process to get to obligation can be lengthy, but that's why we're doing this. So as lengthy as it may be, it actually is streamlined. We don't do any underwriting on these projects. So we do not need financials for this process. What we do need is your project description and the legal authority and responsibility. So whoever that is for your entity or organization. We also need your organizational documents, whether you're a nonprofit, public body, or an Indian tribe. We need documentation of your UEI, your SAM, and your tax ID number. What you have received in that initial email that you received from USDA Rural Development on your application letter is the SF-424. This is the application for federal assistance. We need this filled out and completed and signed and executed by your legal authority and responsibility. Depending on whether you have an non-construction or construction project, so equipment purchase, or if it's a construction project, you either got SF-424A and SF-424B, or an SF-424C and an SF-424D. These are our budget information and assurances for each one, whether it's construction or non-construction. So those are what you've already received. Third one step down is evidence of other funding sources, so your matching funds. Applicants must have available funds to cover the total project costs. These grants may be obligated before the funds are available or in hand. We can get to obligation, get your project approved before you actually have that in hand, if that makes sense. So if you're going after state funds like the match grant fund, all that can be obtained after. A lot of the time, if you are seeking the New Mexico grant match, they are going to need the letter of conditions document in order to proceed further with that application. So if you're trying to apply for that, just wait for you to get closer to obligation so that you can actually apply for that in a timely manner. The applicant's contribution of funds toward the project cost shall be considered the first funds expended. So whether that's equipment or construction, your applicant injection gets spent first, and then we start going into the grant dollars. Move on next. Now this is if applicable. So contracts for professional services are something that we will need prior to obligation. Those have to go under review by our own architect team and approved. So that's that. How obviously, if it's just an equipment project, we won't need that. Construction projects is the Build America, Buy America Act. This is BABA, and we will also need a preliminary architectural report. Those are all items. The PAR, Preliminary Architectural Report Guide, was also attached with the application letter. No, there was a lot of attachments within that letter that you received from us. Also, an environmental report. Approval must be granted before the letter conditions can be issued and before obligation of funds. So the environmental report usually has a good window time frame because we usually go through our SHPO consultation process. So that will usually take 30 days minimum. So just give it some time. Your environmental report is something that you can actually supply ahead of time if you already have that together for a construction project. On. Okay, we're getting closer. So once we get all these documents are approved, we have a complete application and all the requirements have been made, we can get to the letter conditions phase. So all required documents, everything's been approved. You're getting your letter conditions issued. This letter conditions is what establishes and what is understood by the applicant to move forward. You have 10 days to execute a request for obligation of funds and the letter of intent to meet those conditions. So once you receive that letter of conditions, you have some time to take a look at that document. There are 3 sections to that document, and we'll go over that in the next couple of slides. Your letter conditions meeting will also be very, very thorough. There's a lot of information that can be unpacked in these. It is a lengthy process. When you get just the email that I sent you with this is what we need and here's all these attachments, it's a lot. And we understand that. Work with your CDS coordinator, myself, and then when you get to your loan specialist, keep in touch. If you have questions, please call them, email them, ask them everything that you need to know to get this project kind of moving along. Since we get into delays, it starts getting a little more difficult. So we will go over all that when you have a letter conditions meeting, when you actually get your project obligated. So we'll move on now. Now, this is the high-level process overview for project completion in steps. So like I said, letter conditions is broken up into 3 sections, whether you have an equipment purchase or a construction, excuse me. So step 1 is section 1. These are conditions to be satisfied prior to grant closing or before construction begins, whichever occurs first. Step 2 is the grant conditions to be satisfied during construction. And step 3 will be grant conditions to be satisfied after project completion. So now this is where we branch off because we have construction and equipment. So these are very very just general things that we're trying to put on here. We don't want to overwhelm you guys. But with construction, differences are architect or engineer are required. Legal, so your title, your rights of way, all that stuff is required. A full set of plans and specs, open bidding process and construction contract. There'll be construction meetings or inspections throughout the duration. So your loan specialist will be with you all the way to closing. We do everything. We're not just here pushing paper around. We do everything. Put on our boots. We go out there. We go to the construction site. So we do the monthly, the substantial, the pre-final inspection, final inspection. RPR, this is a big one. So a lot of our projects sometimes are not aware that they are required per our agency and regulations to have a resident project inspector on site. This is for you guys. These RPRs are for our applicants to make sure that the contractor is doing the job that they should be, essentially. So that is a cost that sometimes is not really gone over in your initial budget or when you're working up your plan to Congress or your Senate. It's not really discussed because you didn't know about it. So sometimes your project costs to be too low or too high, depending on this one for construction. Down here on equipment, there is obviously no architect or engineer required. Your applicant determines the minimum requirements and specifications. If that's a fire engine, you're going to know exactly what that fire engine you need to service that area is going to need. Request 3 quotes. Applicants select the lowest quote. That depends on pricing of the actual equipment, but we will get there. Once we get further along in the project, we will see exactly how much everything is going to cost and where those parameters lie in terms of quotes. Inspection of equipment prior to reimbursement. So your loan specialist will actually work that out with you and go out to inspect the fire engine or whatever it is when it actually is delivered. So these are a little bit of our procurement requirements for either construction and equipment. So applicant injection are the first funds expended. We kind of went over that. That's for both equipment and construction. For construction, all funding needs to be secured prior to construction. Funds request, these are the forms we have. Construction pay-apps with supporting documentation. And then your equipment is your written authorization before you can purchase your equipment. You'll have to get that authorization from the agency before you can move forward with that. Once that happens, we have an SF, all this also will be supplied to you by your loan specialist. You'll get all this documentation ahead of time. Your SF 270 is a request for advancement or reimbursement of funds. It's always going to be a reimbursement on these grants. We'll need the copy of all paid invoices and canceled checks on those. We have a processing time frame on those to verify and get back to you on your reimbursement requests, but we work out those as very timely. Next. These are some common challenges that we receive in the CDS world. We've been working with CDS projects here in New Mexico from fiscal year 22. And so some of these are like some of the challenges that we receive from both the applicant and from us. All funding project funds have not been secured. So there's a change in point of contact. So this happens a lot. Keep in touch with your loan specialist. We have our own processes on our end that we do not bombard you with, but we have to have an updated contact for your projects at all times. So if someone leaves, we need to know who's coming in, or if there's an interim county manager or anything, you need to let us know so that way we have the most up-to-date information so that we're on board with everyone at the same page so we get the project kind of up to date. Incomplete application documents. Again, this is another big one. Sometimes the document is just completed incorrectly. But again, work with your loan specialists to get those completed. Bidding or construction has already begun. That's another one. We're required to work with national office for any projects that don't fit within our regular program requirements. We have to work closely with you guys on those ones. Adjustments to scope, anticipated project cost being too low or too high. That's it. I think for the webinar, we could start looking at if there's any questions that came in through the chat. I don't see any. I do. Yeah.
Is there a match requirement, or is it just whatever the project cost is minus what we've been appropriated in the CDS?
Correct.
Is what the match is?
Correct. Yeah. So there's not a set dollar amount for that match requirement. If your project costs equipment and go out for your initial and your quotes come back or your bids come back at a certain dollar amount, you go out, you know, sometimes they take longer and it comes back that it's a little higher. That just comes out of your contribution is going to be higher. That's all.
And if the CDS has been allocated to a project, will cover the entire cost of the project? Is there a match requirement? Like, is there an expectation that the project costs more than what we've been allocated to CDS?
Yes, your cash match was based upon population as well as MHI, and so medium household income. So when your projects were being considered from the Congressional office or representative, with those two criteria determine what your cash match was. So it could have been in a tier of cash match of 25, you got 75% grant, you got, or it might be 35 and you got the difference of that, so forth. It is a tiered up to 55, 35, or 25. So whatever that is, you have that information. So you are required to come in with that percentage.
Okay.
If it is a construction, you're over budget, you're required to make sure you have that covered as well.
And you said you have that information? So we've been working with Senator Hyman for our project, but we haven't necessarily gotten any of that match information or those details. Is that information we'll get
We could give that
from
to
you
you.
all?
So what we do have, if we got the information, so sometimes we didn't get all of our applicants' information when we were determining it. So when we know who you are and what service area you're working with, we will determine that service area as well as which is the population of the median households in that area, and we'll determine what your cash match is. And so typically most of ours have been successful going through the state cash match to get that.
Discussion for questions?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just curious on, first off, Ms. Quirino, I think there might have been a mistake in my email. So I didn't get that initial 424.
I think what happened, because I saw our public information officer is the one who sent out that blast that went out separate. But I did notice the typo in your email.
Okay.
But I think by the time she already sent everything out, it was uncorrected. And what happened, I think, was because you're Jeremiah Silva. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. Your last name had an S on there. So you were included in the initial email blast, but it was a Silvas
Oh, okay.
at the end. So I took that S out,
Okay.
but by the time she sent it out, it already,
Got it.
yeah, so that's fine. But it's been corrected now. We have the correct email address for you.
Okay, perfect. And then I was just gonna kind of touch base on procurement or state price agreements, CES. Are those federal contracts allowable? And then because like with our particular project, it's a design build. So that was procured through a formal solicitation in which the provider was selected, and then the provider in conjunction with the architect firm and the contractor are working through the design of the hospital. And so I was just kind of curious on how those procurement vehicles fit within CDS funding.
Yeah, great question. You guys are probably wondering what the heck I'm doing, standing up here. I haven't said anything. So my name's Isaac again. I'm a loan specialist here with the CP team here in Albuquerque. Me and Brianna are the Albuquerque team for you, but I get to answer all the questions today, so that's my job. So back to your question. The first question is, are those state pricing agreements and things like that eligible for rural development? Typically, no. Most of the time, we've had processes in the past where we've submitted those up to our team, and some have worked, most have not. There's a few items they have to address, basically that they have met free and open competition, all the federal guidelines and stuff like that. But the few that I've personally worked on have not been able to prove that, so they have been deemed ineligible. But
So we can definitely work with you to provide you that initial flow of documentation for review.
right,
to make a
right.
determination.
And that's probably something to be said for the group is these answers and all this stuff is very specific and nuanced to each situation. So your loan specialist, once they start working with you, just because we say something on this presentation or provide some information doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fit or apply to your specific situation. Because we understand that there's a range of projects in this list of 18 or 19 that we got just for this fiscal year. So, I mean, what applies to Valencia County might not apply to help, and vice versa. So, but if you have any of those unique situations, definitely work closely with your loan specialist when you get assigned one so that they can provide you some more guidance on what will and will not be, acceptable for our program.
Okay.
The second question, design build. So design build is an eligible procurement method through the community facilities program. It does, however, have a handful of additional requirements over and above our typical design bid build process. I would say we want to be involved as soon as possible on all that stuff because there is some additional items that rural development goes through to verify and ensure that all the federal procurement standards are met. I believe you guys are working on hospital. design build is, we had a meeting about this earlier this morning. So we're doing a little bit of training in conjunction with hosting this meeting. And that's one of the procurement methods came up. And I said, typically those design build or CMC contracts, those alternative procurement methods are only typically seen on large projects, for example, multi-million-dollar hospital. So it is something that's possible, but it requires, you think we have to work closely together during our regular program. If we're going to go through anything even outside of that regular program, it's even more so back and forth with your agency representatives.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great. Thank
Yeah.
you for that.
Yeah.
The other, so is it okay if I continue with questions?
Yeah, go ahead, shoot away.
So in a perfect world, application submitted, every process that you outlined was hit dead on. When would awarded funding actually hit the county? When would dollars actually be made available for the county to request reimbursement?
Great question. So we reimburse our project funds on a as needed basis. So they're not a, excuse me, it's not a lump sum reimbursement. When we get to that point, let's say everything goes, like you said, according to plan, as bills come in, we have like a list or a tier of who pays what. Typically our applicants are the first money in. If we determine that you have any funding, you have to pay. I'm just going to make up numbers for this example. Let's say your project is $1,000. You guys said you're going to pay 100. You got 400 from the state, and we're giving you the last 500. You would pay the first $100 worth of expenses. All of these expenses have to come to us, even if we're not going to pay them, because we're basically in charge of tracking the budget. So you have the first $100 worth of bills, and you say, here's our lawyer bill. It's $100. We're going to pay it. We say, great. We keep track of it. We basically issue you a letter that says, looks good. Go ahead and pay your bill. Next comes any outside funding. So if you have state funding,
Capital
right,
appropriations.
any other outside funding besides rural development, those people come next. That's why when we have our letter of conditions meeting, we really encourage having any additional funding partners at that, so that everyone can be on the same page and we can establish like this is how we do it. And if they have any issues or beefs with how our process is going to go, we can address it at that time and not when it's time to pay a bill and we start arguing over who's paying what. So we have that so everyone agrees. Other guy pays the next $400. Same process. You send the bills in. We look at them, say looks good. Send you a letter that says go ahead and the state go ahead and pay it. You pay it next. At that time, you spent your first $500. Now it's time for our grant to come in. We come in, have a meeting with you. We close our grant. So you have to sign your grant agreement. You have to go through and do a few other forms. And then at that time, you send in bills as they're due. So if you only have another $100 worth of bills, we're not going to plop the $500 into your account. We're only going to give you the $100 to pay the bill that you sent in. So it's not like a full deposit of the entire grant amount. It's on an as-needed basis, basically.
Great. And so as far as like timeline, that fiscal year, the turn of the fiscal year, FY27 or
as far as when you can expect money?
Yeah.
That's a great question because it all depends on you. It really is. It's kind of a joke, but it's not really. If we have applicants that are pretty ambitious and can get us all the stuff we need, we can turn stuff around as fast as you can get it to us. So, I mean, if you have everything ready to go and it's a clean package, there's no issues, send it through. We can move on to the next phase, get you the letter conditions, get you everything you need to get into construction. And I mean, just follow those timelines. It's because we have such a variety of projects, it's kind of hard to give you like the next 90 days or something like that, because when you get your letter of conditions and your email with all the stuff we need, if you can get that all back to us the next day, great. Then we continue to move forward. But we can't take steps to the next phase until we accomplish basically everything that's needed before. Right.
Okay, that's perfect. And then I think the last question that I have for now is you were speaking about resident inspectors. So the county has an in-house project manager. Is that something that would be up for consideration, or does it have to be a specific resident inspector?
So you're gonna love this answer. It depends. But everyone hates that on the scene because it's so honestly, it's really project specific and situation specific. Typically we've seen these resident inspectors as an attachment to either the engineering firm or architecture firm that's like your consultant. They typically have a line item in their budget, and they have people on staff that are qualified to do that. The purpose of these resident inspectors is to be basically a watchdog on your behalf. So that they're supposed to be someone who's qualified in whatever project is happening. So if they're a construction professional that has experience. When it gets to that point, you have to provide rural development a resume. If you guys are going to do it yourself, you have to provide RD with a resume, basically identifying that this person that you're proposing to serve in this capacity has the necessary background and experience to provide you guys meaningful
Oversight.
Oversight on that stuff. At that case, we'd either go through and say, yep, looks good, he can be that person, or she can be that person, or we'd come back and say, you're building a hospital and this guy's only built houses, so
Okay.
it's not necessarily the same kind of thing.
So could it be looked at like as a team? Because in addition to the project manager that the county's hired, because he obviously has other duties,
Sure.
we do have, like you said, that line item for Molson and Corbin. They're our on-call engineer that's kind of holding our hands through the process, verifying pay apps, verifying Buy America and all that wonderful stuff.
Right. It can also be a RPR by committee. If you have 3 people you want to serve, because one guy can only do part-time, that's an option. Again, all of these like not typical processes, you just have to work with your specialists, right? To go through and see if we can get that approved and make it work for you.
Just wanted to apologize right off the bat to whoever my loan specialist is. I have a Karen wig that they bought me at work, so it's his business.
No worries. Good questions.
There's some questions on the chat. The first one is, can you confirm whether these CDS funds must be obligated before September 30th, 2026?
In a perfect world, we'd like to get them obligated before the 4th of July. But I understand that it kind of is specific as far as a hard deadline before September 30, 26. I'm not aware that we've had any hard deadlines put out by our national office. So I think it's get them obligated as soon as possible, pending full applications. So hopefully that answered Christina's question.
The next question is from Michelle Jones. Wait, Christina is coming back saying, if additional time were needed to ensure environmental and architectural completeness, is there any mechanism within the program to request flexibility in the 45-day submission window?
A short answer, yes. So I won't go into further, but yes, typically we work with you to get all of your documents put together. We want these projects to happen as much as you guys do. We just have certain hoops to jump through, as I'm sure you're aware. So nice.
So we're going to go ahead and move on to Michelle Jones' questions. First of all, she wants to thank you guys for all the information. Could you please provide us a sense of how competitive the grant application is? For example, how many requests are made each year versus how many move to approval/obligation? Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that?
It don't matter.
I mean, does it matter that is it because they're appropriations that they aren't competitive?
Right. We don't determine these awards. These awards are all basically plopped into our lap by Congress. So your congressional folks are the people that determined what you got and how much you got. So it's basically up to them. We kind of take over the administration post award. These all come through and are written into the bill. So I mean, if you pay, the politics are when bills get passed, every fiscal year, there is potential to have submissions set into those. So that's where these projects come from. There's not really a competitive basis, basically over and above what you are fighting for with your Congress folks to be put into the bill for that.
projects that were awarded in this fiscal year.
So in regards to how many requests that we've approved and obligated, we average about 6 to 8 projects a year that we're obligating. And that's typically about average only because it's all dependent on the applicants or recipients of this funding on how quickly they're providing us the documentation.
I believe we have 60 plus on the books that we are working on getting to the point of fully complete applications.
That was all. Any more questions on the chat? I think everything has been answered on the chat. Any more questions in here? Oh.
Says that application, do we need cash on hand to cover total project costs, or are documented commitments sufficient? We prefer cash on hand, but you can get your project obligated without having the funds available. You would just not be allowed to proceed to either construction or the purchase of your equipment until all funding has been identified and is available.
So typically for cash on hand, that money will be moved into the construction account that is set up for the equipment.
So does any of this intermingle with grants.gov/justgrants? Or is this all handled outside of that with email directly to you?
It's handled directly with us. Yeah, because these are appropriations, they're not competitive like your normal competitive grants.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Awesome. We will wrap it up here. Just kind of give us some highlights. Again, this is our staff. We have Chrissy, she's down south, Laura, she's up north in Vegas, and then we also have Melissa, who's in Aztec office. Isaac and I are here in Albuquerque. And again, I'm your CDS coordinator. I'll be working with you. If you have any questions, you guys have all heard from me already. Just keep contacting me if you have any questions throughout this whole process. I know it's a lot of information. It is a case-by-case situation because these projects are all different. And so if you have any other questions outside of this, feel free to contact me. I'll be the direct one. And then again, if I'm out, you can contact Christine or Isaac. And thank you all for attending. Again, congratulations, and we will hear from you all soon.
No question. Are these slide deck, is the slide deck going to be shared with everyone? Okay.
I think we're going to, I need to talk to the public information officer to see if that's actually cleared, to see if we can release the document.
Well, I think it's going to be released because we were already sharing it. So if you had your email, you'll get a copy of this in your link and you should have access to that. So I'm pretty sure we could be able to send that.